entry and reintegration. You guys all, if you were around last night, heard Lisa's story and saw that film and how inspiring that was. And we're really fortunate to be able to tell those stories and be inspired by them ourselves. So for the next hour, we have a lot of really inspiring speakers who are in that area. Ryan mentioned Larry Williams earlier, but the first speaker is somebody I met a few years ago, become good friends. His name's Jason Spyres. And I actually first got in touch with Jason because I saw his story on Facebook, and my first reaction was, this isn't real. I didn't believe anything he was saying. It sounded made up. I'll let him talk about it more in detail, but the quick part of it is he served over a decade in prison for a non-violent cannabis offense, selling marijuana, got out, transferred into Stanford University after 15 years, and now runs his own business. And it's such an unbelievable story that next year we want to tell it in film, because it's the only way to do it justice. And for the first time now, I'm going to show part of that film, a little trailer, a little sneak peek.
15 years on it.
When I was 18, I started selling drugs. I was selling marijuana, and then I came out to Illinois, and while I was back here, I found out the price difference in cannabis. And by the time I was 19, I pulled up, I seen the cops in the driveway, standing with my roommate in handcuffs. I knew right then and there it was over, I was busted. And I like to tell myself that for like the first 5 or 6 years of my sentence, I was just in shock. I didn't actually believe that this sentence was going to exist. Who in their right mind would ever think you're going to spend multiple decades in prison for nonviolent cannabis? It's impossible. Well, I did that one, so now I'm ready to pull off the good impossibility. I said, I want to go to college, I want to study engineering. Denied by Northwestern, denied by Cornell, denied by Columbia, denied by Brown. I had it on my back that I'm going to make this happen for the 40 to 50,000 people in corrections who are laughing at their own goals. It was early June, I'm driving down the road, and I got an email notification that my application status had been updated, and it says, congratulations. And I got into Stanford, and I couldn't believe it. It was magical. Impossible is only the boundary inside your own head.
Jason Spyres, come on up.
Yeah! Jason! Hey!
Yeah, it's incredible. I hope I'll let you get into more detail about it, and I think it makes sense to go kind of from the beginning of your story, because like I said, I don't know if I ever actually told you that. The reason I reached out to you in the first place was this doesn't seem real. It doesn't seem possible.
I had that same thought. Personally, I know it's real.
Yeah, we know that now. But going back to the beginning, can you talk a little bit about, you're 19 years old when you get arrested. What's going through your head, the shock of it all?
When I first got arrested, I'm smart enough, even back then, that I was underneath no delusions that I wouldn't ever get caught. And so like when I first got arrested, I wasn't actually surprised because I knew you couldn't sell drugs forever and get away with it. But I had no understanding of the consequence you could get. So like here we are in 2022 and you're probably blown away by it, but I never realized that you could lose multiple decades of your life for nonviolent cannabis offenses. And what even got crazier than that, and the things that went through my head, is that when I got to prison, I learned due to weird things in Illinois, I was considered more heinous than a second-degree murderer, and I wasn't eligible to participate in the same programs that are in good time that some sex offenders and some murderers receive. Now, that being said, I believe in rehabilitation for everybody, but I also just think everybody should be on board with the fact that a nonviolent cannabis offender should get the same opportunities as a murderer.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
That's a fair point, yeah.
That's right.
So when did you start thinking about that, though? Because I think you've told me before, for the first couple of years when you were in prison, you were just in shock and didn't believe that that, first of all, a 30-year sentence, he didn't serve the entirety of that, that was going to exist into the fulfillment of it. What 5-6 years in, how do you stay motivated? How do you stay focused on, trying to improve yourself and trying to get out of prison eventually?
My mind did the same thing yours did. This isn't real. It's not real. They gave me 30 years, but I went on appeal. A governor would commute my sentence because they'd be like, "What? We gave him 30 years for pot? No, we're changing this." And I got 12 years in when I was standing on a wall because I worked in the major's office as a clerk, and it dawned on me that, hey, I only got 3 more years to go. And then that's when I realized I'm actually going to do those 3 more years. And it wasn't the 3 years that scared me. It was the fact that society had failed to stop it from happening. Mm-hmm. And I was vocal about it. And I was published in newspapers about it. Over 100 times I was incarcerated. And society, by and large, whether they cared or not, didn't stop that sentence from coming to pass. And the idea that society didn't care enough to change it devastated me more than the idea of doing 3 more years. And so that was very difficult for me, because before that I just didn't believe it would actually happen.
How did you stay motivated? Getting into Stanford is difficult enough. I couldn't do it. But being in prison for a decade and a half, what's your mentality like to keep pushing forward and become so driven to have those lofty goals? Especially in the face of what you just said of you couldn't believe that the sentence was going to exist in its entirety.
So, I don't think I've ever told you this. This was in 2004, and I knew that I'd messed up and I wanted to do better for myself. I just didn't have a plan for how yet. And I started seeing a future where I could be more successful. And I was talking to this kid, his name was Little C. He was in another cell, 19 years old, 4-corner hustler, had a tattoo on his neck. But he realized that some of the gang leaders it was basically a scam. They were taking advantage of having a young kid to do their dirty work. And when he realized that, he wanted more for himself. And we were just talking, because I was actually helping him get his GED. And I started talking about some plans I had for me, and he started talking about plans that he had for himself and asking what was possible. And I looked at him, and he was a black kid from the south side of Chicago, I think 19, had 4-corner hustler tattoos on his neck. And when he asked me what was possible, I hated myself because I knew the barriers that he would face when he got out, even though on the inside he had changed his vision. A lot of people wouldn't see what's on his inside. And to me, I was like, I'm clean cut, I'm articulate, I'm fortunate enough to have gone to prison for something that nobody really cares about. I'm gonna knock down every single damn door that he would ever face because people are sympathetic to me. And I want it easier for him to walk through it. And I woke up every day ready to knock down a door. And I said, what's the biggest doors that society thinks I can't open? And which ones do I want to walk through? And that's what I focused on.
There you go.
Did you, when you're 19, you're a kid, essentially. Did you have aspirations to go to college? Did you do well in school? Because you went to one of the best universities in the country. Did you just learn a lot in prison?
No, I didn't even finish high school the regular way. They kind of put me on home study, and I did the entire senior year, which was a joke because they give you the easiest math package you can possibly do. I did my entire senior year in 2.5 weeks of home study, popping yellow jackets from a gas station. So I turned it in. So I graduated on home study, and my dream job was to get a job on the railroad, because they pay $10 an hour.
Right.
10. You can make $10 an hour to get a job for the railroad. And I was like, maybe I can get on an R&R.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
Because that's what success was to me at that point. But, you know, I was an arrogant young kid, and I was like, wow, here's a way to make $1 million. And so, like, my goals weren't really academic at that point. My goals were like, how do I get food in my mouth? And I don't mean it to say, oh, poor me, I was so broke, but, like, my family of 5 lived on welfare payments of $797 a month with a $523 mortgage payment. Like, literally, how am I going to get to school tomorrow? I hope to find 50 cents, because that's how much it costs in gas to get back and forth. Like, that's what my aspirations were in life.
So when your aspirations change and you get out of prison, I mean, there are other hurdles just to getting this application to Stanford and being accepted. When you were in work release center after prison, what are the hurdles, the mental hurdles especially, not just getting into college, but to re-enter society? It's a lot more than just getting accepted.
So a buddy of mine just got to the work release center that I was in. They still have my photo up on the wall. I told the warden when I got to the work release center, I'm going to put a Harvard acceptance letter on your wall. He said, go for it. I failed because I just got a Stanford acceptance letter. He accepted that and still put it on the wall. Harvard, you denied me if you're watching this. Stanford's way better anyways.
Yeah.
So, the hurdles are, I remember I left to go get on a bus because I needed to get clothes. And I wrote a request slip to go to the Goodwill to get clothes. When I go walking out, they say, go 3 blocks that way, take a right, go 2 blocks, there's a bus station. Get on the number 1 bus. It's the university bus. Take you to the Goodwill. Tell the driver you're going to the Goodwill. You'll be good. I leave. No one's over my shoulder watching me. I'm walking down the street. I swear they have cameras watching me or something. Like, I'm not just walking down the street unescorted. And I get there, and the number 1 bus must have been a very, very popular bus because there was all kinds of people sitting on the bench. So, like, right here's the bench for the number 1 bus. Right there's the bench for the number 2 bus. Right there's the bench for the number 3 bus. I had like 15 minutes for the bus, and the benches were sheltered so you didn't get rained on. There was too many people waiting for the number 1 bus. Another guy was like, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna go stand over there. And he goes to the bench for the number 2 bus, maybe 15 foot away. I stood there in the cold because I couldn't get to the bench for the number 1 bus. And if I walked to the number 2 bench, I knew a guard was gonna come jumping out from behind a bush, say, what are you doing? We told you the number 1 bus. You're trying to escape or something. And that sounds funny. And I knew it wasn't real. But there's a difference between knowing something's not real and feeling it as if it is. And that is how I can explain institutionalization to you and the barriers people face. Being too afraid to go sit on a bench that's not for the number 1 bus while you're waiting for the number 1 bus.
Have those mental barriers, how they changed over time? Now you've graduated college and you're running your own business. Do they still exist in some ways? How has it evolved?
Well, I brought this bag up here. I'm gonna burn up a minute. You guys are gonna humor me with it. This man didn't believe I was real, but he got a hold of me and he wrote an article about me. And where's Tillman at? Is Tillman in here? The Illinois Policy Institute has wrote articles about me. And I know at various times it made a difference, especially with investors. So this is a t-shirt for my company. It's called TAP. It stands for Training All People, because all people deserve a chance. And Illinois thought I was unteachable, and I think all people are teachable.
Yes.
So with that, you were a part of my business getting created. So all you're getting is a lousy t-shirt. I'll take it. See you later on. Because anybody who helps create a path for me to go through, so little C can walk through that path and every other version and variation of him, I want them to share in the dividends of it. Not the money. I'm going to keep the money for me. But I want them to share in the dividends.
I'll take the t-shirt. This is Let's talk about your business, though, because I'm sure it was your whole journey inspired the creation of this. So what are you trying to accomplish with it? How is it set up? What are you guys doing?
So I'll talk at a high level and then I'll get kind of specific. So some of you might have already heard me say this before, but I'm just going to ask a general question. If I ask you, what does a carpenter do? Think about it in your head. What would you say? Most people say, like, oh, they build things with wood. Like, what kinds of stuff do they build? Houses, maybe a boat, a cabinet. Cool. What kind of tools do they use? A hammer, a saw, tape measure. Right? We all kind of intuitively know that. And then I use this on investors. I would tell them, hey, you're a pretty smart, capable person. I'd say at least average intelligence. What's a millwright do? And barely anyone could answer. And then I'd say, so what kind of tools do they use? What kind of stuff do they build? And they don't know. And I say, what if I told you there's 500,000 of them in America? What if I told you they're growing at a 19% growth rate? What if I told you they're pivotal to our economy, to us making semiconductor chips, electrical vehicles, all kinds of things that's going to revolutionize the way we do our economy? If you don't know what it is, how the heck would little C know what it is? How would a kid on the south side of Chicago understand this opportunity? And you don't begin to apply energy to create a future for yourself if you don't believe the opportunities are there or even know they exist. So I looked at what's the thing stopping what's the psychological barriers stopping people, and then what's the actual barriers that we can fix. A millwright works with machinery and makes sure, troubleshoots it, makes sure it keeps running. Another term for it's an industrial technician. In the semiconductor industry, they have tools that cost millions of dollars. They create the chips that go on our cars, our washers and dryers, our computers, our phones, everything. If China invades Taiwan, all that stuff's going to get a lot more expensive because we don't have the people here to keep those machines running. So my company has created training that overcomes the gap of, do you actually have to be in a physical classroom? You can do it on a VR headset, but that's the candy to make it look good. It has practical value, but you can also do it on a desktop with WebGL. Some of these machines cost $10,000 a minute when they're down. And when you put somebody in the headset or on the desktop, they get to see what a $2 million producer tool looks like. They get to walk around it. They get to see what the chamber lids look like. We're all old enough that we probably remember as a kid that somebody said, hey, what's Tommy's phone number? And we went, 530-528-2342. You had muscle memory. You might not have known the answer, but your body had the muscle memory. And this training simulates it enough that when they get to the floor and it costs $10,000 a minute to have those machines down, they have the muscle memory of going through the actions and be taught quicker. But more importantly, it allows them to put the headset on. It allows them to see a future and see a success path and say, you know what? I can see myself being a millwright. That wasn't so hard. I buy big machines. I use wrenches. You say chamber? Okay, this thing. And until you believe something is possible for you, you will never achieve it. So my company is about telling Illinois, you were wrong when you said that I was not teachable. And my company is about telling little C and all the other kids, there's a way to envision success that's so different than anything you've seen in the environment that you're in. And if you believe in it, I can take down a lot of the barriers. And once they see that, the name of the company before it was Training All People is going to be Envision. Because I'm helping people envision a success path. Just like I'm sure there's someone in prison right now that points to me when they say they got big goals and they're like, I'm going to try and go to Harvard. I try to tell them go to Stanford instead. But there's no CO that can do what they did to me and go tell me one person who's pulled that off. Because I'm not quiet. And I tell everyone that the future is possible for them. And if they can't see it, That's why I created my company,
Huh.
to help them envision. And no pressure, but if this guy does right with that movie, millions of people will be able to envision it for millions of more people.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Right. But that's exactly why we want to do the movie, and we want to tell your story. We want, as many people in here as possible to meet you, because what you just said about envisioning success is so important, and that's the goal of the film and telling your story. So Jason, thank you so much for being here and telling your story to everybody.
Thank you for having me.